All right, we're hearing a lot of news about Jadeveon Clowney lately. The start of the regular season's coming, and he has yet to sign his franchise tender. So there's a lot of trade talk on the market because obviously Houston wants to. I don't know why they didn't just trade him earlier. They had a lot of leverage earlier. If they knew that Clowney wasn't going to sign, they should have traded him this offseason. We saw that happen with Frank Clark and D Ford, kind of centering around the Chiefs. So the Texans really dropped the ball. Probably a big fault of that. It goes on Bill O'Brien, who is their de facto general manager now. So the big thing about the Clowney is there's a few teams that have expressed interest. Supposedly the Dolphins, the Eagles, the Redskins, the Seahawks, and the New York Jets are the 5 teams that have expressed and actually talked with the Texans for trading for Clowney. The early frontrunner seems to be the Miami Dolphins. They seem to be the team that's most interested with him. It'll be curious to see what he does. Clowney is saying he's willing to sit out, so obviously the Texans are motivated to trade him. What do the Dolphins have in compensation? It's obviously the Texans' biggest need is offensive line. They're going to want Laramie Tunsil. If I'm Miami, I am not trading away Laramie Tunsil at all. The Dolphins' line's terrible to begin with. Tunsil is their top prospect or top player along that offensive line. There's no way I'm giving him up. I know how good Jadeveon Clowney is. I know how he'll fit. But, you don't trade away a play like Laramie Tunsil, and especially when you don't have a good offensive line. So I think if the Dolphins were going to make this move, they'd probably trade away a first-round pick. Or at least a couple day 2 picks. I think Clowney would fit well within that defense. Brian Flores, their head coach, came from New England. He likes to have, the system that they ran there. They had a lot of, those bigger defensive ends. I wouldn't say Clowney's like a Trey Flowers, but he's not your undersized guy. He's got the perfect size. He'd kind of be like how they used Chandler Jones a few years ago. He'd have a lot of success in any off defense that he goes to, but I think he'd fit well with what Flores wants to do. Like I said, Clowney's actually visited the Dolphins and met with Flores, and that's why they're kind of the front runner, because he's actually gone through and done all these things. I'm just real curious. You haven't heard a lot of what they would do to give up. There's a new report out there that the Dolphins players would revolt if Laramie Tunsil is traded. So it'll be curious to see how that plays out. The 2 teams that are the next, I would say, in that second tier below of most likely to happen are Seattle and Philadelphia. And supposedly those are the teams that Clowney wants to go to. There's been a reported trade floated out there of with the Philadelphia that they'd give up Nelson Aguilar and I'm going to mispronounce this, Haloti Vaitai. Big V is what they call him. He's the left tackle. He was able to come in when Jason Peters got hurt and have success. He's not really with them drafting Andre Dillard. They have that surplus of left tackles with Jason Peters and Big V. So he's definitely expendable. Reportedly, the Texans want a receiver. So that's where the Nelson Aguilar would fit in. He'd be that nice slot receiver to complement Will Fuller and DeAndre Hopkins. So that makes a lot of sense. I wouldn't take it if I were Houston. I get that it would be an upgrade over what they have. I'd want a little bit more. That's maybe why the deal hasn't been done. Maybe they want a second-round pick to go with it. Maybe they want a third-round pick to go with it. I would want more than just those 2. Seattle, I haven't heard much of what they want. Once again, if you're thinking receivers, they don't have a whole lot of receivers outside of Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. It's just a bunch of just guys. Who are they going to trade away? Dwayne Brown? I don't think so. So you'd have to be multiple first round pick probably, and another couple picks or 2. Maybe they just do it straight up for a first round pick. Who knows? I think if Houston is able to get a first round pick from Clowney at this point, he's on a 1-year deal. It doesn't look like he's going to play in Houston next year. They'd probably take that. I doubt him being on a 1-year deal would go for a first-round pick in Seattle's mind. He would thrive in Seattle's defense. He'd probably play that base defensive end on the opposite of Ziggy Ansah. They'd, Seattle does a lot of great work with their front and their alignment, getting these guys in winning situations. I think he'd do well in Philadelphia. They have a lot of success with their defensive ends also. The two teams I think that are in the mix that don't really have much of a shot are the Jets and Washington. The Jets desperately need a left tackle or a defensive end. They don't really have those edge pass rushers, but what are they going to trade to give up? They don't really have a good offensive line. I mean, their best offensive linemen are Kelvin Beachum, Kelechi Osemele, and they just got Matt Khalil out of or Ryan Khalil out of retirement. They had to get him out of retirement because they had no depth. So it's not like they're in a position to just trade off one of those guys. I mean, if I'm Houston and I can get Kelechi Osemele, I'd probably take that. But I still think you're kind of losing in the long run. Receiver wise, they don't really have Robbie Anderson's on a 1-year deal, and Quincy Enunwa and the rest of the guys aren't really guys you're going to be trading Jadeveon Clowney for. Washington's interesting because maybe you could do a swap between Trent Williams and Jadeveon Clowney. Houston would definitely be the big winner. Trent Williams does not want to be in Washington. He's one of the best left tackles, best offensive linemen in all of football. So that'd be a big win for Houston. But Washington doesn't want to have to give him up. I know Clowney is a good player, but the value of Trent Williams is that much better. So I think that's kind of the tinkering, but I don't think that's going to happen. It looks like Clowney's probably going to get moved. My money is probably on Miami just because of all the stuff that's rolling. But I think Philadelphia, unless one of these teams ponies up a first-round pick, Philadelphia probably has the best package to give the Texans. So that's kind of my dark horse. And Philadelphia was already one of my teams I was predicting to go to the Super Bowl. If they're able to get Jadeveon Clowney added to this team, they might be one of the favorites to go and win the Super Bowl.